Welcome back, everybody. Another beautiful day in North Dakota. I've been working on, I got some gaskets cut for the oil pan and for the front cover. That's over here. We've got a special guest out here today. Dad's out helping. He's been working on clutch stuff here. Show him what you've been doing. You got this. You got that machined on the back surface for the throw out there. Show them what you've been doing here. We got this all working here, all fitted. We had to weld up the studs there because they were all worn out. He machined them back down. Working good. Now we're going to just dry fit everything together and make sure everything's correct before we actually do the official install. He made up a new, that's the old one, right? That's the old spring. New lock wire for those two pieces. We got the throwout bearing pressed on to the oil slinger here. There's the new clip that's got to go on. New lock clip. On there yet. And you got that piece drilled out for this, for the lock wire. So yeah, now we're going to work on putting this together and seeing if the clutch all works. I made a spacer disc in there for right now because we still haven't gotten the actual clutch disc back from Norm. That's on its way. It's in the mail somewhere. So I just made up a spacer for now just to kind of test everything. Dad also brought some more goodies. I finally got my radiator back. That looks awesome. So the radiator cap works there. Check that out. So once we get the engine back in, we can actually throw that on there and throw the hood on there and make sure that all fits the way it should. He brought a bolt for the steering support here that he made up. He brought some other bolts for around here. What else did you bring out here? Okay, so he made the new hand crankshaft, spring for that. We got to make it to size yet. We got there's the exhaust system, an adapter flange, and a chunk of pipe, and an elbow. And it's awesome about that. It's an old piece of pipe and elbow. Actually made in USA. So there's the flange he made. That turned out pretty nice. I'm gonna drill the 2 holes in it yet. So yeah, lots of goodies. And like I said, there's more surprises coming here shortly, so we will check back a little bit later. See how this fits together. Okay, we got the seal installed in the front cover. We just came up with some spacers on the anvil, so we had a good solid backer on the casting. And then took my new driver kit and soft hammer and tapped her in there. Tap, tap, tap. See if it fits. Oh, got on camera too. The front cover is on for good. We got the gasket in there, a little schmutz on both sides of the gasket. We used a cut up pop can as our, what do you want to call that? Little sleeve to get the seal over the seal surface and kind of keep everything centered up at the same time. So I think we're about ready to flip it up and put the clutch stuff back on the back of the engine so we can put the whole assembly into the tractor and see if everything is coming out right. So we got the flywheel on, the pilot bearing in. I'm going to figure out how to put this clutch together yet. We're still a little bit unsure of how this all needs to happen, but this goes on the outside. Okay. We'll figure it out. And back apart. We got just that spacer disc in there to simulate our clutch disc that we're still
waiting on, which, like I said, it's in route. Maybe show up tomorrow at best. And that must be too thick because we get about 3/16 to being tight, and we lose our adjustment and it starts to bind up. So we're assuming that means that needs to be thinner. So we're going to take it apart, take out one of our clutch discs just to get, or maybe both of the clutch discs, just to get to the right thickness, and try putting it together again, see what happens. Okay, it's a new day, it's a fresh set of eyes. Maybe with a little less frustration in the brain, we can figure something out here. Dad's on his way back home, but I'm out here again today to maybe look at this clutch a little bit more. We were riding the struggle bus there last night because we got a problem and we can't figure out what the solution is. We don't even really know what the problem is, to be more specific. So I'm probably going to table that for a little bit and maybe work on something else today to try to get something done. But so what we're dealing with, I don't remember where we left off last night. We've had this clutch apart and together several times now, trying to figure out what's going on. Like I said, we have the two worn old original friction discs in there. And in between, I got a piece of 1/4-inch plywood just to simulate the driven disc with the splines in it that should be here any day now. But we just had that in there as a spacer just to get the right pack thickness, so to speak, to test fit everything else and see if everything was working, right? Our goal while Dad was here was to get the clutch in and put the engine back in the tractor to make sure the clutch fork was working and the linkages and everything, basically that the clutch was functioning. It was kind of our goal, but we didn't meet that goal. So where we're at basically at this point is we can put the clutch, we got the clutch together here, this part of it, with the new throwout bearing on there. And when it's out of the tractor, all the spring tension is sitting on this throwout bearing up against the front of the clutch here. When you actually put it in the tractor, these ears go up against the ramp discs in the clutch, and that takes the pressure and applies it to there, and then this comes out. The problem is it's not coming out enough. We don't have enough space between the back of the throwout bearing and the front of the clutch here for the throwout bearing fork to fit in there. It should go in behind there. So as it is, when this is in the tractor, as of right now, we only have about 5/16 of an inch between the back of the throwout bearing and the front of the plate here. And it should be like, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch more than that, we're thinking. Because this should slip back there easily and have just at least a little bit of wiggle room, minimum. Because when your clutch is engaged, this fork should just be floating in there freely with no tension on the bearing. The only time you should have that is when you actually go to disengage the clutch, pull back on your hand lever. That throws this fork, which just pushes on this throwout bearing, which pulls that whole assembly forward, which compresses your spring farther, which lets the pressure off the ears, which lets pressure off your whole disc assembly here. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. This is a goofy setup, and it's kind of hard to wrap your brain around how this all works. So, for the life of us, we can't figure out why, what's wrong here? Why don't we have enough space for this to go behind there when it's all assembled? So that's where we're at. So, I was watching a video, Adam Savage Tested channel on YouTube the other day, and he had a pretty pertinent thing. Somebody was asking him, what does he do in a case where he doesn't know what to do? A problem he doesn't know how to solve. What does he do? And he had some pretty good advice. He said, well, start with what do you know for sure? And work from there. Eliminate what you do know, and that at least narrow down what you don't know, right? So that's a good way to look at it. So we started doing that last night. So what do we know for this clutch? We do know that this is the right fork for this tractor. We do not know for sure how thick these ears should be. Remember, these are the ones we had welded up. And Dad, machined them down here a little bit. But they might need to be thinner yet. So that's one possibility. But we're pretty darn confident that that isn't at least entirely the problem. Because we know roughly they were at least this big. You can see where they added to it here. So it's not as if these were thin enough originally to go behind that 5/16, because that's already thicker than that. So that could be part of the problem, but we don't think that's all the problem. What else do we know for sure? We know that at least this new bearing is the same size as the old shot original bearing that was in there. I'm assuming that it was right, but you never know. Maybe there's a small possibility that this old original bearing wasn't even the right one or something. But I find that unlikely, because it's, with as crusty and stuff as it is, and I would assume that this is the original bearing. So we know that's the same thickness. So that's not our issue. We are pretty confident that this plate is not the issue, because I'm pretty confident that this is the tractor plate. We can compare it to this known, where we're assuming is a power unit engine plate, one of my spares. The offset here is the same, so we know that that's not the variable that's off. The center hole is bigger on this one, so we know that it's not this plate for sure, because this whole assembly would go right through it. So there again, we're pretty confident this is the actual tractor plate that belongs on this tractor. What else do we know? We know that as far as we can see, these arms and the ones on here that we're using are the same. Minor casting differences, but all the important features are the same as far as we can see. So we know that. We know that this assembly, this is the one that was on the original part here that Matt made a new one of, because this one's all wore out. But when we made the new part, we made it to the same specs as original as far as what the sizes really should be. Took out the same length, which is the most important thing at this point. It's the same length as the original. And we're assuming that this is the correct tractor original part. At this point, the only thing we can come up with is maybe this really isn't the right one. Because if that was longer, that would make this stick out farther and there would be more of a gap here. But we don't know if that's the problem or not. I'm pretty confident it is the tractor part though, because it's got the correct oil slinger here on the end to fit into the end of the differential transmission case here. And as far as I know, that's a tractor specific thing here. It's not a power unit thing. So I don't think that is the variable that is off. What else do we know? We know that the spring has got to be right as far as we know, because it's the same as the other spring that I have. There's no differences there, same size and everything. So we should be able to eliminate that. We do know, one thing we did discover last night as we were struggling taking things apart and putting it together, is that it does matter which orientation you have this adjusting ring onto the front plate of the clutch. for a while there, we had it 180 degrees out. And if that is the case, there's two adjustment holes. I don't know if I can turn it here one-handed. There's two adjustment holes in the plate. And as you start from one extreme, you adjust it, and then you switch your two bolts to your second two holes, and then you get the other half of your adjustment on your ramped discs. If you have those two 180 degrees out, the holes don't work out right and you don't get your full adjustment. So we fixed that. That improved upon our problems. At least we have our adjustability the way it should be. But that doesn't change the depth at all, of course. We know that this pulley, as far as we know, is the correct one, because that is what was on this assembly with it, and it is different than the stuff that was on this one, the power unit one, I'm calling it. Where is that at the moment? Over here. So this is the one that was on it, and that is completely different again. Same concept, but it's different. So it's not as if we're mixing and matching parts that shouldn't be mixed and matched there. Come on. Get it out of the bag. One hand here. Struggling. Okay, so yeah, there's the other assembly. And that's, like I said, definitely different. This is your throwout bearing on this one, and that is definitely different. But as a whole, from end to end, it's approximately all the same length anyway, even though it's different. So we really don't think that that's the variable that's off either. So maybe there's just something stupid that we're missing here, as far as we don't actually have that splined clutch disc here. Is there something that we're just completely overlooking, that having a spacer in there to simulate that disc it doesn't work the same way as having the actual disc? But as far as I know, it should work the same, because that driven disc with the spline in it, as far as I know, that shouldn't touch anything else. It's kind of bell-shaped up to clear these studs, which that might be an issue. I got spacer washers underneath these studs, so the cotter key pin holes line up, because originally either they were tall castle nuts on there, or mixing and matching parts. This had a different clutch on this particular crankshaft possibly, but we can always change those studs if there's clearance issues, or cut them off or whatever. That's minor. But the point is that disc is bell-shaped to clear them, and it shouldn't hit the back of this pulley at all either, because that kind of defeats the purpose of the whole clutch. All your pressure should be on these three ears here, which go onto the three ramps of the ramped disc, and then that's your adjustability. As you turn that clutch, these here, that's putting more or less space into. So as your discs wear, you adjust that to take up your space difference, basically. That isn't actually affecting your distance here at all. So hopefully that all makes sense. And if anybody knows where we're going wrong here, please let me know, because we're going bananas over this. We had Dad, me, and Lawrence all out here last night scratching our heads, looking at this, trying to figure out, what are we missing here? This shouldn't be this hard. We thought we had the hard part figured out here now. We could just put the clutch all together and we'd be good to go, but it seems to be throwing us one more curveball. So, like I said, I think I'm just going to table that for a while, walk away for a little bit, work on something else for a while. We got some McMaster-Carr stuff in. I got a new stud for the water outlet on the side of the block. And for this guy, instead of a bolt, we'll use a stud and a heavy hex nut and a copper crush washer to seal it off. Although I'm wondering if I got the wrong size there. They look pretty small. These are some spacer washers that I got to put in the linkage pins here to take up the side-to-side play. Hopefully I got the right size there. We can find that out. That'd be an easy victory for the day. And then I got a couple different size rubber seal type washers to hopefully replace packing glands in the fuel sediment bowl. I'm going to try that at least, see if it works. Originally they had like a little leather seal and some like graphite rope packing in there. I figured I'd try some more modern rubber seals to see if that would work first. If not, we'll go back to original stuff. But in my mind, this might be a little bit better, seal up a little bit more positively than the graphite packings and stuff that tend to wear out over time. We'll see. So maybe I'll play with that a little bit. There's lots of stuff. I got some, Dad also brought some felt. I don't know if I mentioned that. Some scraps of felt he had around to make the felt seal for in the fan hub. So we could work on that. I think I already mentioned that I had gotten the bearings right for the fan hub. The new height bearings. So there's the number on that, if that helps anybody. And this is the race. There's the numbers on that. And like I said, I got them from this Vintage Motion. Jim, he, like I said, they specialize in high roller bearings and that kind of thing. There's his contact info if anybody wants to get a hold of him. I emailed him and he was really good about getting back to me with email. He even got back to me on a Saturday, which was really surprising. I wasn't really expecting that. So I gave a thumbs up to him. Not sponsored or anything, but I like to give credit where credit is due, and he helped me out. So I'll be probably going back to him for more stuff in the future. Actually, like I mentioned previous, I got a set of bearing and outer race for the one of my 2035 fan hub assemblies too, just for future projects. So yeah, we could work on that. We could work on this crankshaft handle a little bit. We still could work on this exhaust pipe. We'll work on something. See whatever I feel like working on here today.